Liberty in our lifetimes in a free state of our own. That's the vision. That's the dream. And we are building it in New Hampshire. I'm Eric Brakey, your host and renegade statesman for the Porcupine Report. Welcome to your source for porcupine news and free-range conversation on matters of liberty. All right, let's hop into the show. Hey there, all you porcupines, you. This is your host, your renegade statesman, your executive director of the New Hampshire Free State Project, Eric Brakey. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode, which we bring to you every single week, every single Wednesday at 7 o'clock p.m. And I will say, very funny thing happened this week. I was sitting there at my local coffee shop, like I often do. It's my home away from home where I get work done. In downtown Dover, and I'm sitting there on the phone talking through some stuff for upcoming events with one of our grassroots leaders. And while I'm sitting there, there's a gentleman who's kind of sitting nearby. I can't really talk to him because I'm on the phone, but he just turns to me and he shows me his phone. And on his phone, what is it? It's like the episode catalog of the Porcupine Report. So I'm to whoever that was. Thank you for being a fan of the show. I'm sorry I wasn't able to talk, but it is nice to know that our audience base for the Porcupine Report is growing. There are fans everywhere, and I'm not just bumping into them at PorcFest and Liberty Forum. I'm bumping into them around New Hampshire and sometimes even around the country because, of course, what happens in the Liberty homeland is something newsworthy for all who care about the cause of liberty. So for wherever you're watching, on whatever platform, I appreciate you tuning in, sharing your feedback, and sharing the show with your friends. And a few things I will say. First of all, we are releasing this episode. It is the week of Independence Day. So happy Independence Day as it approaches. You know, it certainly does remind me about what is truly unique about New Hampshire, which is we seem to be the only state, certainly the only state in New England, and I would argue the only state in America that still embodies that original 1776 revolutionary spirit that set America on the mission we were supposed to be upholding for so long. You know, when you go back to those days, those words of Thomas Jefferson, that our mission was supposed to be life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is, and when you think about how Benjamin Franklin told us it was a republic if we could keep it, well, it certainly is sad to look back on that and know that over the course of 10 generations, we did not keep it. Our general government, which started as a federal government with decentralized power, gradually accumulated more power, and it abandoned federalism, embraced nationalism, and then eventually finally transformed in this global imperialist system that we all live under today. It's sad that those words, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, seem like quaint relics of a bygone era, except in New Hampshire. New Hampshire, because of the Free State movement and because of the native libertarian spirit that has long been here, New Hampshire is in a state where we are keeping that spirit alive, not just in our culture, but in the actual politics, in the governing philosophy of those who are making policy decisions in our state. In a little bit, we'll be talking to one of those individuals who is leading the charge on liberty issues in the state legislature. And I'm very looking forward to that as we work to keep that revolutionary spirit alive here in the Live Free or Die state. Before we get to that, though, there's a few announcements I want to share. First of all, I want to tell you about our sponsor that I've been telling you about over the course of the last couple episodes, which is Porcupine Coffee Roasting. I've got some right here. Let me tell you, this month I got from them, they roasted it. It's from Honduras with flavor notes of chocolate and almond, pear, honey, lemon, and lime. And this is, I guess, their signature one for the month. Always new things. This is, I love coffee. I didn't always, but it has grown on me as I've gotten older, and you can't just take naps in the middle of the day like you could when you were a little kid. Now I need a little bit of coffee to keep me going. And one thing I love about Porcupine Coffee Roasting is that this isn't just coffee, it's a revolution in your mug. Proudly operated by Free Staters in the Free State. They roast only specialty grade beans from small producers, always fresh, roasted in small batches to order with a roast date you can trust. There are no stale beans from these folks. Porcupine Coffee is all about sovereignty. And when you drink Porcupine Coffee, you're supporting a small, independent, private membership association that embodies the live free or die ethic. And here's the deal. You can use code PORKREPORT for 15% off at porcupinecoffee.com off of individual products. Plus, a portion of your purchase will go to help support this very program. And don't you want to support the show? I know that you do. So be caffeinated, drink good coffee, and support the Porcupine Report with Porcupine Coffee Roasting at porcupinecoffee.com. So live free, drink free, and support some great Free Staters doing great stuff. All right. Another thing I want to tell you about, we're in July now. I know we're just recovering from Pork Fest still. Fantastic Pork Fest this year, by the way. Thank you to everyone who came out. It was truly wonderful. But maybe you haven't had enough of us, of the Free State community, and maybe you haven't had enough of festivals in the North Country. And that's why I want to tell you about this month. We have Freedom Palooza, the Freedom Palooza Music Festival. That's going to be this July 25th through the 27th. At Roaring Brook Farm. Now, this festival's about liberty, but it's also about music. We're going to hear from a lot of great acts, including the Mammals, Red Pill Friends, Jody Shaw, That Hat Guy. Personally, what I'm looking forward to is the Free State Acoustics, because they often invite me to sing with them. In fact, I was doing some singing with the Free State Acoustics at Pork Fest. And I'm planning to go to Freedom Palooza myself, and maybe I'll get to sing with them some more. I don't know. We've sang a few different great songs. Ground Control to Major Tom, Space Oddity. We've been practicing on Gravedigger by Dave Matthews Band and a few other good jams. You never know what you'll find. So come out to Freedom Palooza. You can camp up there. I'm planning to camp. That's July 25th through the 27th. And we also have a discount code for you if you'd like to join us. Great opportunity to visit New Hampshire or to connect with Free State community if you're already in here in New Hampshire. And that discount code is Porcupine 2025. Porcupine 2025, like the year that we're in right now. And the animal that symbolizes our libertarian Free State movement. Porcupine 2025. Get 5% off. Get your tickets. Freedom Palooza. I'd love to see some of you guys there. Great chance to come out. And one other event, I'll tell you guys more about this. This is a little bit further out, but it does require some more travel, which is Ron Paul is turning 90 years old this year. And our friends at Young Americans for Liberty are throwing a 90th birthday barbecue for Ron Paul in Lake Jackson, Texas on August 9th. It's actually the day after my birthday, but I'm going to be traveling down on my birthday to go celebrate Ron Paul's birthday. And I know that it's looking like we're going to have a pretty good contingent of a good delegation of folks from the Free State who are planning to go down and attend. But I thought I would extend the invitation to you. I don't have any discount codes or anything to offer you for this event, but the Free State Project is a sponsor of the Ron Paul 90th birthday barbecue. And you can learn more and get tickets at ronpaulbarbecue.com. There's going to be a lot of great speakers, by the way. For some reason, they're inviting, this renegade statesman to speak, but also there's going to be Tulsi Gabbard, Tom Woods, Spike Cohen, a lot of folks. You really just got to go to the website and see the list of all the great speakers who are going to be there. And anyway, it's going to be a great time. ronpaulbbq.com to learn more, and maybe I will see you there. All right. That's all of the stuff I want to get out of the way before we have our conversation with our guest today. As I mentioned, there are folks in our New Hampshire State Legislature who are working to keep the 1776 spirit of that American Revolution alive in the policies and the philosophy that governs us. One of those individuals is Representative Michael Granger, who is no stranger to this program, has been on several times. I think we had him on early as the legislative session was starting out this year, giving us a preview of a lot of the things that were to come. Now we're at the tail end as the legislative session has just finished up. They've just passed a budget, which has good parts, bad parts, ugly parts. We'll be talking about all of that. But one thing it did include was a particular proposal that Representative Granger really led the charge on, which was repealing and eliminating the vehicle inspection mandate on New Hampshire motorists. And he got it done. So let's welcome to the show Representative Michael Granger.
Thank you for having me.
I also didn't mention, Representative Granger, that you are the leader. You said not to use the word chair because nobody elected you. So you are the self-appointed leader of the Liberty Caucus in the legislature. So I don't know what that means, to be leading something that nobody's voted on you to lead, but I guess people just must respect your authority intrinsically or something. I don't know. How does that work out for you?
If they don't like how I run things, they can leave and do their own thing. I don't have them on leashes or nothing. I'm not the king.
All right. Well, that's similar to how the FSP operates. We are a benevolent dictatorship. And anyway, so I really appreciate you coming on. Representative Granger, I want to show for you this little clip. I don't know if you saw that our friends at Granite State Matters, Jeannie Deach, she was the one who some folks may remember about a year ago when I had just joined the Free State Project. I guess actually it was a little longer than a year ago now. They released this public enemies list of all the Free Staters they could identify. And anyway, I was surprised kind of coming to New Hampshire. I hadn't even officially moved here yet. And I was already on the enemies list of the anti-Free Staters. Anyway, she just did some presentation on the terrible agenda of the Free State movement. And, I will say it is really nice to be in a state where it's the socialists complain about the libertarians taking over. It's the opposite of what's happening in New York City right now. But I thought this particular clip, it's just a short little clip at the very end when she was taking Q&A from folks. I thought you might appreciate this little clip. So I know Renita has got it all synced up for us. Renita, you want to run this clip from this presentation that our anti-Free Stater friends just ran?
Someone asks, are the Free Staters behind the discontinuing of vehicle inspections?
Definitely. Yes.
That was it. Are the Free Staters behind the discontinuing of vehicle inspections, Representative Granger? How do you plead?
Some very critical activists are Free Staters, and they really worked their tail off to make this happen. So I worked within the State House. I worked with the legislators. I tried to work with people, compromise, not compromise, convince, all that jazz in the State House, deal with putting stuff in the budget, making sure that I got to the Senate to testify, figuring out what the pushback was, yada, 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 all in the legislature. But this would not have happened if it weren't for Jeremy Olson and Steve, whose last name I can't pronounce, but it starts with a Z. And they worked overtime rallying people in Manchester, especially, to go and make noise about this. So their tactic was pretty simple. What they did was they printed out a bunch of flyers with information about the bill, which was HB 649. And then they just looked for parked cars with expired inspection stickers and placed it right underneath the windshield wiper. And it turns out that if you're targeting people with expired inspection stickers, the chances that that person driving that car actually dislikes car inspections is insanely high. It's incredible. It's perfect targeting right there. And that really made a difference. We often in the legislature will get hundreds and hundreds of emails on a specific bill. This bill was a little different in that every single email was unique and came from a person who actually lived in New Hampshire. And you could prove that because they had a New Hampshire inspection sticker of some sort, right? Their car was tagged with a New Hampshire plate. So it wasn't like this was moneyed out of state interests. This was purely New Hampshire people living in New Hampshire making noise. And I think the biggest stroke of genius was, instead of having a form email that says, we ask you to support HB 649 for reason 1, 2, 3, 4, conclusion, they just left that section in their email form blank. So they made it easy for people to contact the legislature and easy for them to comment on the bill, but they didn't tell them what to say. And that meant that we were privy to some of the most insane reasons for people to fail an inspection that you could think of. I'll give you an example. This is probably one of my favorite examples. A man owned a Jeep Wrangler. And as many Jeep Wrangler owners do, they like to put little lights on top so they can light the trail when they're off-roading. One of these lights was non-functional. He failed a New Hampshire state vehicle inspection for a non-functional auxiliary light that didn't even come with the thing. That's just insane. That's just crazy. But if you tell the legislature that you failed for that reason, almost anybody who knows anything about a Jeep will be like, okay, well, yeah, that's obviously insane. And so they just piled up like crazy. And everybody in the house who reads their email, which is most of them, they're reading these insane stories of people failing vehicle inspections after they had just replaced their brakes. They said the brakes failed their inspection, but they just replaced them 3 months prior. And it just so happened that it was a brake shop that failed them. And you hear other stories. Some people made the observation. It said if they go to a tire shop for their inspection, they'll fail on tires. If they go to a brake shop, they'll fail on brakes. Now, isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting how that lines up like that? It's almost as though there's an incentive here for them to find a reason to fail you. But the noises worked, and lobbying the legislature from the citizens, really truly from the grassroots. They at the time they just started a PAC, but they didn't have a PAC at the time. There wasn't any real serious organization or anything like that. They didn't buy an email list. They just went out and they used shoe leather to make a difference on this. And those were free staters. You know, Jeremy Olson, he describes himself as a free stater. Steve Z, the same thing. And they're incredibly good activists. And that's probably the best thing about the Free State Project is it attracts the high quality activists, right? It's one thing to have a person who can sit at a keyboard and, you know, type on the tweeter. And it's another person who is actually willing to go out and actually rally people about a specific cause. And free staters will do that. So Senator Gene Deitch is correct. Free staters were involved. They were critical in getting the car inspection bill to pass, although it was passed in the budget. And so that was another little political trick, though. The bill itself is still in the Senate, but the language from the bill passed as part of the budget. So yeah, so I say yeah, that's true. She's correct.
Well, I know another thing she noted. She highlighted in her presentation one of my newsletters that I've written where she's noted the Free State Project is taking credit for free staters helping to pass universal school choice in New Hampshire. And I know that earlier this session, one of your colleagues on the other side of the aisle made the news for declaring that the push for universal school choice was, in fact, a free stater plot to bring more libertarian families to New Hampshire. I'm curious I'm curious what you would say to that. Is it a free stater plot to bring more libertarians to New Hampshire? And if it is, what's so wrong with that?
It sort of harkens back to Hitler used to breathe air. One of those. Free staters are right to support these causes, right? There is no bigger how should I phrase this? It would be incredibly useful if the public education system were replaced by some sort of free market educational institution that actually provided an education to children. Because I think we can all agree that the world is better in a world where the world is better if there's smarter people in it. Right now, the public school system, though, completely well-intentioned and probably against the will of many really high-quality teachers that work for this school system, it seems to just be rigged to make kids dumber. And it's a very sad thing because you go for, and maybe I'm showing my bias here. I'm a high school dropout. I've never had much respect for the institution of public education, although I have had respect for a lot of the public school teachers, especially the good ones. But it seems it's becoming more obvious and unignorable that there is something wrong with the actual institution of public education. And that we need to be moving away from that if we want our children to develop into successful adults, ones who are capable of thinking for themselves critically and capable of discerning the truth in a world full of lies. And so in that respect, yes, there are a lot of free staters I know who have worked overtime to see the EFA program be popularized. And there's a lot of regular old typical non-liberty oriented conservatives who have done the same. I'll give you an example of, I've never considered Steve Jobs to be a conservative or a libertarian. But Steve Jobs in the 90s basically described his ideal school system, and it largely resembled the Education Freedom Account program. This isn't exactly a left or a right-wing thing. This is just recognizing that the current government-run schools do not provide a decent, high-quality education, and the bang for the buck just ain't there. We are planning to use Education Freedom Accounts ourselves in my household. My son is 6. He's going to be 7. We're going to be sending him to a private school, a private Christian school. And the EFA program, just with the state portion of the funding, should be able to cover basically 100% of that tuition for the year. And that opens up doors, right? We're not a wealthy family. I don't make 6 figures. I'm a wagey, as the kids say these days. I work for a living.
I think, what do they pay in the legislature? Big bucks, right?
We get $100. That's a lot.
A minute? An hour?
No, a year.
A year? Wow. All right.
Before theft. So
and you have to pay taxes on that too. I mean, I guess it is tax money in the first place. So
yeah, it is.
Paying too much.
There was
I guess you have to pay federal taxes because there's no state income tax in New Hampshire. So
yeah, that's true. You still have to pay the federal taxes, and it's an interesting story behind how that happened. If I recall correctly, in the 1800s, we were like most other states that set your own pace, where the legislators set their own pay, like so they voted on it, like it happens in all states pretty much other than ours. And they had a per diem system, if I recall correctly. So basically every day they showed up, they got a salary. And so they would just live in Concord for the summer, and they would make out like bandits, and they would go to a committee hearing every now and then. And, so a constitutional amendment was passed to define constitutionally what our salary was. $100 a year was quite a lot of money at the time, because we had a gold standard.
Yeah.
So the Federal Reserve is
gold a year.
Yes, the Federal Reserve has not been very friendly to the New Hampshire legislature. But getting back to EFAs, I'm a big believer that the industrial Austrian style school system is becoming obviously something that needs to be replaced. But we can't just be rug pullers, right? There's a lot of people where the public education system actually works for them, right? So we can't just deny them access to that and kick them out. And that's what is good for the EFA. It allows people to have an off-ramp, and it allows the market to develop so that better options that match every single student become available. And then eventually maybe we can consider, down the line, if the public schools are actually worth keeping around, if almost everybody doesn't use them. And if we ever get to that point, it will be a wonderful thing, because all the students in New Hampshire are going to be getting high quality educations that suit them and their needs, not the needs of the drafters of the public school system from over 100 years ago.
I mean, I think it's great. I think that we desperately need a real marketplace for educational options for families. And I often think back to, I can't remember which Malcolm Gladwell book it was. I've read so many of them over the years, but I always remember this anecdote. There was apparently maybe this seems like a strange detour, but I guarantee it's relevant to the point. There was a period of time where all these companies were trying to figure out what is the perfect tomato sauce, right? and they were all doing all this testing, all this polling. What is the one perfect tomato sauce? How do we make the one tomato sauce that's going to serve all of the people like the best? Kind of like how Heinz is like the best ketchup. Everyone likes Heinz, tomato ketchup, and it's like there's a few people who get Hunt's, but it's like whatever. But what they actually found was that there was no perfect tomato sauce, but there were many perfect tomato sauces, right? That different people had different preferences and different choices, and people clustered around different kinds of things and different needs. And it's like, I feel like our education system has been strangled for a long time of when you funnel everyone into all the students into kind of this one size fits all model. Every school has to try to be at its best kind of the same general idea of what a good school is, rather than recognizing that there is no one like version of an education model that's right for everyone. Kids have different needs, they have different skills, and I my hope is over time, and not just with private schooling options and homeschooling options, but even within the public school systems, that public schools, all of these school options will be able to specialize and cater towards particular education models or particular fields of study that really appeal to the very different learning styles and talents and needs of different students. So I think that this is such a bold experiment that New Hampshire is leading the way on in this country. I know that some other states have come on board with universal school choice too, and that's great and wonderful. But I remember that like New Hampshire was like one of the very first to get that first model, that camel's nose under the tent for school choice. And now it's going universal. So every family that would otherwise be entitled to about $20,000 in taxpayer money going to their assigned government school on behalf of their kid, and instead they can get about $5,000 of their own money back to choose what's best for their kids. So I think that's great.
$5,000 can pay for private school tuition at many schools in and around New Hampshire, like within driving distance of the New Hampshire border. And I think the simple fact of the matter is, if the private sector is capable of providing a better educational experience for a quarter of the cost, that's something to look into.
I think it was Joel Valenzuela who posted something on Twitter a few weeks back that was like, yeah, if you can't compete with these private options and you are basically have like a 4-to-1 advantage in terms of the amount of money that's going to provide this education, if you can't compete, then it's just like time to pack up and go home.
Exactly. And on school choice, the EFAs aren't the only school choice option that we're working on in New Hampshire. We are working right now on expanding public school choice. So what that means is, the basic idea is that if you do not, as Glenn Cordelli, who's the chair of education policy, puts it, it ends zip code discrimination in the public schools. So if you don't like the school that you're attending or your kids are attending, you can send them to a different public school, and that's all fine, right? So you could so if you're going, let's say you're going to Milton and you want your kids to go to Farmington, you could just send your kids to Farmington. And I believe you have to drive them there, but other than that, it should be fine.
So you would take responsibility for transportation. I imagine otherwise, like the system currently, I know coming from Maine, like there would oftentimes be students from like one town over going to the next school system over, but it always kind of relied on kind of these superintendent agreements that one superintendent has to sign off. Both superintendents of both districts have to sign off on it for different reasons. It's a very bureaucratic process. And this would just say, hey, if there's slots open, people can sign up for them from other areas.
There's various guardrails in place, and there's also a financial aspect of it that is very hotly contested. But that's the essential idea behind it.
Where is that in process? Because I seem to recall hearing that had stalled out, or
I don't believe it's going to be signed this term. I believe it may be retained, if I recall correctly, and which means that it's going to come back next year as a new bill. I could be incorrect about it because I haven't been paying attention too closely.
I know that there are a number of good proposals in that situation. I think Defend the Guard is in a similar posture. It's going to be coming back next year.
Yes, that one was retained in pursuit of a blessing by the Secretary of Defense, Hegseth.
Yeah.
And so before he was the Secretary of Defense, I don't know, he might be a little busy. Before he was the Secretary of Defense, he came out with a full-throated endorsement of the Defend the Guard Act, specifically the New Hampshire Defend the Guard Act. I remember it quite happily. Yeah. And the question is, now that he's the Secretary of Defense, has he changed his mind on the topic? He's like, well, I sure hope not. But I believe that Representative Mannion is going to be chasing that up. Hopefully he can get an answer on that. And if we just have a little thing saying, yes, please pass Defend the Guard, then that would go a long way in the Senate and in the House. It'll probably pass the House as is, but the Senate is where sometimes good bills go to die. So
yeah, well, whether that comes or not, I certainly hope that it does. I hope that it passes the House again, and that this go around we get a roll call vote in the Senate so that folks can be on record, because I know that last year the Senate wouldn't even vote on it. They didn't want people to know where they were landing. So even
that was
even
dramatic.
just to get them on record would be a big step forward.
Mm-hmm. If the Senate doesn't want to vote on something with a roll call, they'll be creative.
Yeah, then you challenge the ruling of the chair or something. You can find different ways to get people on record, in some way, shape, or form. Well,
there's only 24. So the Senate this year is very interesting as compared to last year. So there's 24 senators, and 16 of them are Republicans, which means that they have a 2/3 supermajority in the Senate. And it also means but the historical president of the Senate has retired, and now we have a new Senate president who does things very differently. Senator Sharon Carson, who heroically stood her ground on Group 2 and held that hill as long as she could possibly hold it.
Well, we'll have to talk about that in a little bit, because
okay.
Unless you want to talk about it now, because I know that was one of the big conflicts in the budget battle, right? Everything kind of it seemed like you guys got like a pretty good budget agreement between the House and the Senate. I wasn't following all the details of it, but it seemed like, at least I guess I heard Democrat gnashing of teeth all the way through the end about cuts here or there. Mm-hmm. But then it was Governor Ayotte who insisted on spending increases related to pensions for certain government employees. What can you tell? Imagine I know nothing about this. Like some of our audience probably doesn't know anything about this. I know a little bit about it. What can you tell us about that battle, how that played out? And I guess we've talked about some of the good things done this year. I guess maybe this is one of the things that might have long-term financial ramifications.
So in 2011, the state had a problem in that it was going broke because of pension debt. This is not a new phenomenon. Many states have gone broke because of pension debt. However, New Hampshire did something a little different. They took people who had not been paying into their pensions as long as others and said that those people are not vested. And then they made a completely different plan for them and got rid of the pension benefits that they would have been able to earn had they done nothing. So I believe the cutoff was 10 years. So if you had 10 years working in the police and fire, then you were vested, and then you would be able to get the pension benefits that were assigned to you. But if you were doing less than that, then no, not so much. So this set up separate groups, and one of those groups was Group 2, and those were people that claim that they were promised certain pension benefits when they were hired, and that they never got them because of this. So this has been a thing that has upset them for a very long time, and it's understandable why they're upset. They feel as though they were promised something and that they didn't get it. I can certainly understand the enthusiasm for getting what they feel is their just desserts. The Senate, on the other hand, and most Republicans in the House are not of the opinion that we should give that back to them on the grounds that it is outrageously expensive. And so if you think about the private sector, pensions basically don't exist anymore in the private sector. The concept of we went from what's defined, so we went from something called defined benefit, if I can speak today, and we have moved in the private sector to something called defined contribution. So instead of having a defined set of payouts that you get every month after you retire or anything like that, what you do instead is you define how much you're contributing to your 401k or whatever you have, and then that investment balloons and you get that payout when you retire. Some people don't like defined contribution. They like defined benefits. And one of Governor Ayotte's priorities before she got elected, and one of the major promises she made to the Group 2 members, about 1,500 police and firemen, was that she would restore the Group 2 pension benefits, right, with spiking, which is a concept that I'd have to explain a little bit. But that was a major reason that she was able to win the election, was that she made the promise to restore Group 2, and a lot of people took her to the bank on that one. Now, Senator Carson and Senator Gray, they are very fiscally conservative senators, and they know the danger of these pension plans and how much they can seriously put the state in a bad position financially. And they went to bat to try to reach a deal on this that didn't include spiking. For those who are unaware, spiking is when you increase your salary towards the end of your term. So if you're working for 20 years and then you retire, the last 5 years or so, what you do is you work a ridiculous amount of overtime and you take as much sick leave as possible so that the amount that you earn in those final 3 or 4 or 5 years is high. And then because the pension benefit that you're due is based on your final wages, that means that you're spiking your pension to increase your pension. And so this is problematic for a lot of reasons. And the Senate, even though they understood that there was an incredibly large desire, and unfortunately they didn't have the votes to stop Group 2 altogether, they worked very hard to get rid of this spiking. And it was a big political to-do with Senate President Sharon Carson versus Governor Kelly Ayotte, as well as House Republicans in the mix. And since the Republicans are in charge of all three branches, this became sort of an internal feud. But in the House, how it breaks down is, even though House Republicans mostly don't support it, more than 23 Republicans do. And so what that means is that if it was just let's say we had a unicameral legislature, they would get the $300 million over 10 years, like set in stone very easily, because they had the votes, because all the Democrats would vote for it and 23 Republicans, or 25 or something Republicans would vote for it. And that would make it a done deal. So as much, I have in the past complained quite significantly about the Senate killing my favorite bills. In fact, I did so earlier today. But I have to say, to Senator Carson and Senators Gray credit, they picked the right hill to die on, and they really gave it their all to try to prune this back. And they used every bit of political capital they could to try to get us a deal that we could live with. And even though it isn't, it's often said that a sign of a good deal is one that both sides walk away unhappy with. I think that's what we have here, because it is an incredible cost to taxpayers, but I don't think it's going to put us under. And it did get rid of most of the spiking.
Okay, so the spiking is mostly, and I'm familiar with this practice. I heard about certain folks in the some of the sheriff's departments around Maine when I was there doing exactly this, right? Yeah, racking up the overtime in order to have the highest possible salary at the end of their career to base kind of their pension off of, which certainly feels like that's not the spirit of the system.
No.
But in a way to bilk taxpayers, which, much respect to whatever service they do for the people. I'm not raining on that parade, but but certainly that feels like a manipulation that shouldn't be rewarded at taxpayer expense.
Yeah.
So I mean, is this something to be worried about going forward, that it's going to kind of create more pressure for additional taxes? I know that from what I heard, the budget, while a lot of good things went in the budget, a universal school choice, repealing the vehicle inspection mandate, I'm sure a lot of other things,
work requirements for Medicaid.
Oh yeah, and I think something's happened on the federal level there too. I know that's something that actually I put a lot of work in on that policy in Maine, but
I don't think it'll put us under, and I don't think it will result in any new taxes as long as the Republicans hold the House and the Senate, and the governor. So as long as we hold all three branches, or at least one of them, that puts any new taxes as a straight no. And all actions, which I'm not going to say exactly what, but everything that I have seen in the House this year has proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that regardless of any particular Republican's position on Group 2, I don't think there's even one that would come out and say that they would support any sort of new taxes in order to pay for it. But there was also a hidden gem in the budget that nobody noticed and people overlooked at first when we were reading it, because I guess we didn't quite understand the context here. But for those who are familiar with the public education system and how it's funded in New Hampshire, the courts in the 90s sort of overstepped their bounds in the past and said that the state needed to be responsible for local school funding to a much higher degree than historically we have been. And the legislature has dealt with this in the past by trying to maintain what the funding amounts that the New Hampshire courts have said that they should. But embedded in the budget is some language that is indicating that we might just not do that anymore, because the amount of money that we're spending on these schools is pretty outrageous. And and as we've discussed already, but in the budget that was signed, it goes through a short history of the 1993 and 1977, the Claremont, series of public school funding cases, and where the Supreme Court of New Hampshire ruled specific things that the legislature had to do. And it says, quote, however, in the most recent of these cases, the judicial branch has asserted authority to review and set aside the legislature's determination with respect to its four supposed obligations, and to fund education at levels determined by the court through a process which, though adjudicatory in form, is legislative in substance. Accordingly, the legislature now deems it necessary to definitively proclaim that, as the sole branch of government constitutionally competent to establish state policy and to raise and appropriate public funds to carry out such policy, the legislature shall make the final determination of what the state's educational policies shall be and of what funding needed to carry out such policies. Which is rather unusual, because the New Hampshire State Legislature is basically saying, this was signed by the governor, the other two branches of government are telling the judiciary, you don't get to set our base adequacy rates anymore. We're going to determine that. This is not something that is in the court's interest. The court does not get to tell us and legislate from the bench by saying how much we need to use tax dollars to fund these public schools. So you got to take the good with the bad.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I saw that come across. I'm not as familiar with all the history of the Claremont decision, but I've certainly heard it mentioned a lot in the year and a half since I've made the move. So it certainly does seem to me that the legislature, I oftentimes wish Congress would do a lot more to reclaim their authorities, their legislative responsibilities and authorities from the other branches. That's a
double-edged sword, though, because then you see how they actually make decisions. Like, I don't know if they need.
Well, I think oftentimes legislative branches appreciate other branches taking their authorities away, because it means they don't have to vote on controversial things, and they can just say, boy, there's nothing I can do. I'm going to write a strongly worded letter and complain to this executive branch agency that they shouldn't do it that way. It's like, well,
that's exactly what happened with the car inspections.
Yeah.
So with the car inspections, as someone who has spent a lot of time analyzing that issue and breaking down exactly why the car inspections became so burdensome in New Hampshire as compared to other states that still have a pretty burdensome car inspection racket, why was New Hampshire the worst? I think it breaks down to, we just gave too much authority to rulemaking. We just said that the executive branch, you can just do whatever. And instead of having to lobby the legislature to say, hey, we want to make a rule that says that if you have an interior light for the passenger side in the mirror that doesn't turn on, that you can fail inspection for that. And instead of them going through the legislature where we say, no, that's ridiculous, get out of here, they just have to lobby the rulemaking authorities. And then they just say, well, the statute says we have the authority to make rules on this. And that's kind of how it went like that. So I'll give you an example. The great Steve Smith, Representative Steve Smith, he's the deputy speaker of the House. So he fills in for Sherm when Sherm takes a break. He actually pushed a bill several years ago because he was sick of cars failing inspection simply for having surface level rust on body panels, on non-weight bearing components. And he said, look, you have a right to have an ugly car in New Hampshire. That's your prerogative. If you want an ugly car, you can have one. And it passed, and it was signed, and guess what? They just re-implemented the same exact rules in rulemaking. And so to this day, people are still failing vehicle inspections for having an ugly car. And it really goes all down because we pushed a bill last year just to make them a little bit less strict, to make the car inspections a little bit more tolerable. And it just died in the Senate. And the New Hampshire Automobile Dealers Association came out like crazy against it. And those are the same groups that are lobbying the executive for more rules. And so that's one of the things that convinced the House that enough was enough. We tried to reform it. We tried to fix the system, but no, it just needs to go. It just needs to not be here anymore. And that's why the repeal went through.
Yeah, I know that to some people, I see some people online who say, well, isn't this going to create more dangerous roads? But, but when you point out other states that don't have kind of these inspection requirements, it's interesting. It's not just like southern states. It's not just like warm weather states that don't have to deal with snow. Like maybe this is kind of this is a common kind of law around New England, but you head west into a lot of the other kind of cold climate states. I don't remember. I was asking Grok before for a cross-reference of lists without vehicle inspection, but a lot of the Great Lakes states, they deal with winters just as harsh as we do in New England, and they don't have these vehicle inspection requirements. And I think that your point is very well taken about the incentive structure, the crony capitalist incentive structure that this creates for these shops to be able to fail people in order to get more business. I mean, I will tell you, I just had my first experience with the vehicle inspection system in New Hampshire, and it wasn't as a horror story like some others, but it was because I took it to the Volkswagen dealership for my Jetta. I was getting all taken care of. Everything passed inspection except for one thing, and the one thing is, I bought this car when I was living down in Texas, where the tinted window laws are different. And so I failed inspection because my windows are too tinted, and I would have to spend money to peel off the tint or something, or get a doctor's note. So I'm talking to my doctor about that. We'll see. But I'm hoping and my wife asked me, I told her, I'm excited. This vehicle inspection requirement is going away, but she's skeptical about these things. So she said, well, are they going to, but that law is still on the books about the tinted windows. Am I going to have to, what for me in that situation, all right, eventually I'm not going to need the inspection, but if I get pulled over, will I be able to get ticketed for tinted windows still? Do I still need that?
I believe so. I have to check and see if it's a violation. So I believe that it is a violation to not pass the roadworthiness standards as put out in 266. There have been a lot of efforts over the years to get rid of the window tinting laws. However, the number one group that opposes it are the police, on the grounds that they can't see into your car, and you could have a shotgun in there and you wait till they show up and they don't see you, and then they shoot you because they can see you, but you can't see them, sort of thing. It's a hard push. Whether police will actually start pulling people over and checking their windows, that I'm not so sure about. Right. So
I'll have a doctor's note ready.
You'll have a doctor's note ready. I would keep it with your car registration.
I'll put it right there in my glove compartment. So
there we go. Just make sure you don't make.
I get headaches from intense sunlight, so I need these tinted windows.
Yeah, that's another one to do. I've discovered almost every single gripe people have about New Hampshire state vehicle laws in this process, because everybody knows me as the car inspection guy now. And they send me emails, and some of them are pretty valid. So, for instance, apparently in New Hampshire, there's no grace period for purchasing a vehicle for you to get it registered. So if you don't have temp tags immediately, then you can't drive it. It's illegal to drive it. So basically what people do is they just hope they don't get caught when they drive it home. So if the DMV is closed or something. And that's a bit of an annoyance. It doesn't seem to be a major problem that comes up a lot, but okay, maybe that's some housekeeping to take care of. There's also someone pointed out. So if you have a vehicle and you're selling it, and it's less than a certain age old, you must have a title for that vehicle, which makes sense because if you don't have the title for that vehicle, it might be stolen. And we don't want people stealing cars. We don't like Grand Theft Auto here in New Hampshire. Car stealing is bad.
Do it in the video games, not in real life.
Yes, and differences, But let's say you're a tow truck company and there's an abandoned car by the side of the road and the police ask you to impound it because it's in the way. And so you tow it and you don't have the title and you don't know whose it is. And it's just there and nobody ever picks it up. And you do a search or whatever to try to find the rightful owner or whatever. But eventually you just have to get rid of the thing, right? It's just taking up space and you're a tow truck driver. And so there might be a way to look at that and sort of clarify that. However, there's higher priorities and there's lower priorities, Our laws in New Hampshire are fairly reasonable when it comes to vehicles, especially now that we're getting rid of the vehicle inspections. But there's always going to be those weird things. And here's one I would like to know from the viewers. Do you think that we should have salt on our roads? Because some states just use sand. And there is an interest now in looking at that issue and deciding whether it is worth the problems. So the problem being, if you put salt on the road, yes, it melts the ice and it melts the snow very well, but it also destroys your car underbody versus sand. But sand is dirtier. And so that's also something we're going to be looking at. And so if anybody has opinions on that, I'm all ears because I don't have a strongly defined opinion on salt versus sand.
All right. Light up the comments. Salt versus sand. Representative Granger wants to know.
That's right.
Any other takeaways from the budget or the legislative process this year, or what are you looking forward to now that you've escaped the hellmouth of the State House and you got the second half of the year in front of you?
I look forward to having time on my hands because this is not a primary election year. I have a vacation. And so I'm still going to be working my 9 to 5, but I have time now. I haven't had time for the last 6 months. What am I going to do with all this time? Like I'm mowing my lawn now. I haven't been able to do that in a while,
And the lawns have been growing pretty quickly. I've noticed with my lawn. My neighbors complain. I'm like gone for Pork Fest for a week, and the lawn is out of control. And I'm getting notes. Can you do something about this?
Well, it's nice because I think life is better lived if you live as though you're a flywheel. So if you think about a flywheel on an engine, its job is to basically keep on spinning and have some serious weight and momentum behind it. That way, if there's some sort of problem or some sort of minor stall in the function of the engine, the weight and the momentum of the flywheel sort of keeps it going. But good luck trying to stop a flywheel with your bare hands, right? You're not going to be able to. So if you live your life like a flywheel, the momentum will keep you going. And yeah, you'll be tired and you'll be really, really exhausted. But I feel as though life is more rewarding when you're tired and exhausted all the time, because especially when you're doing something that's rewarding. I feel as though all the work that, me and 200 of my friends have been doing on getting rid of vehicle inspections actually bears fruit for people. Like, it's so nice to have a big battle that actually is going to help people out. My math says at a moderate estimate, we just saved the taxpayer $100 million a year. All right. We were freaking out about Group 2. And at most, Group 2 is going to cost $30 million a year. Right. So we saved, so if you're paying now, that's coming out of the state's coffers. But at the same time, that's like 3 Group 2s.
Yeah.
They just saved the taxpayer at the low end.
There are all kinds of extortion to eliminate on the people in New Hampshire to make life more affordable. Either the direct taxation extortion or the crony capitalist mechanisms that allow
that's right,
private companies to extort.
But yeah, live life like a flywheel.
All right. Words of wisdom from Representative Michael Granger, who is demonstrating that the Free State Project is a project. There are still tyrannies to eliminate in New Hampshire. We may be the most free state, but that doesn't mean we have achieved a state of absolute maximum freedom, of the kind of maximal government that Thomas Jefferson envisioned, a government that only protects life, liberty, and property. We still got some more work to do, but we're getting there, and we're all getting there together. So Representative Granger, thank you so much for your leadership at the State House, and hope to see you now that you got some time. Hope you'll be popping into some more of the Free State events that are going on all the time around the state.
Sounds fantastic. Thank you for the invitation, and thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. All right, everyone, that's the show. Thank you again to Representative Granger for joining us, for giving us that wonderful rundown of some of the things that happened during this legislative session. I want to remind you again, I am looking forward to Freedom Palooza, July 25th through the 27th. That's going to be up at Roaring Brook Farm up in the North Country. We were just up in the North Country for Pork Fest, but I'm going back for Freedom Palooza, and I hope that you consider joining us for this Freedom Music Festival. Really put on by a lot of the Free State community up there with the North Country Porcupines. And again, you can use discount code Porcupine 2025 for 5% off your tickets at freedompaloozanh.com. You're going to hear some great musical acts, including some amateurs who just love to jam out. I love the Free State Acoustics, a homegrown kind of Free State group that formed at Pork Fest 1 year and has been going for several years straight. They're going to be at Freedom Palooza, and who knows? Maybe I'll be singing with them. I wait for their invitation. They often do, and we have a lot of fun. So you'll see a lot of great music acts, including perhaps myself. And sometimes people tell me I'm actually pretty good. I don't know. It's a debatable point. My wife doesn't think so. She's my harshest critic, but that's what wives are for, right? All right, everyone. That's the show. Thank you so much. Happy Independence Day, Secession Day this week. And furthermore, my opinion is the Federal Reserve should be destroyed.